I woke up during my surgery and heard my husband telling the doctor to let me slip away. I want you to understand what that means, not in the dramatic, cinematic way that sentence might land when you hear it, but in the actual, physical, terrifying reality of what it is to be a human being lying on an operating table, paralyzed by anesthesia, unable to move a single finger or open a single eye or make a single sound, while you hear clearly, unmistakably, in the voice of the man who said "I do" 11 years ago, those words. Let it happen. She's worth more dead than alive. Just let it happen. I could not scream. I could not move. I could not do anything except lie there in the dark behind my own eyelids and listen and survive and decide in whatever part of the mind remains active in that particular nightmare that surviving was not going to be enough, that I was going to have to be very careful, that I was going to have to be very, very smart, and that I was not going to say a single word about what I had heard until the moment was exactly right. If you are listening to this right now, I need you to stay with me, because this story is about surviving something that was designed to end you, and about what you do with the time you were not supposed to have. And before I go any further, tell me in the comments where you are listening from right now. Are you someone who has looked across a table at a person they trusted and felt suddenly and without warning that the person looking back was not who they believed? Are you someone who has had to be very quiet and very still while you figured out how to be safe? I read every comment, everyone, because this story belongs to every person who has ever had to outsmart a danger that was sleeping in their own bed. Stay with me. Every word of this matters. Let me take you back to the beginning, not the operating table, not the recovery room, all the way back to the marriage, to the man, to the slow and careful construction of a life that I did not fully understand until I was lying paralyzed inside it, listening to it try to end me. Act 1, the marriage, from 2:30 to 11:30. His name was Vincent Callow, and I will start there with his name, his full name, said clearly, because for a long time after everything that happened, I had a complicated relationship with saying it out loud, as though the name carried weight I wasn't sure I wanted to lift. I have since come to understand that the opposite is true. Names kept silent have power. Names spoken clearly in the full light of what they belong to are just sounds. Vincent Callow. There it is, just sounds. I am Elena Marchetti Callow. I was born in a small city in northern Italy and came to the United States at 19 with my parents, who had built a modest catering business in Italy and wanted to build a larger one in a country that had more room for the kind of ambition they carried. My father is a man who believes that food is the most honest form of human communication, that you can tell more about a person from what they put on a table and how they share it than from anything they say with words. He has fed people his entire life with the specific generosity of someone who understands that nourishment is love made practical. My mother managed the business, the accounts, the contracts, the hiring, the negotiation, with a precision and a toughness that I did not fully appreciate until I needed those same qualities in myself. I grew up understanding two things: how to make something out of very little and how to read people. These are related skills. When you are new to a country, when your English carries an accent that some people use as an excuse not to take you seriously, when you are building something in a place that did not save a space for you, you learn very quickly to read rooms, to understand who is interested and who is performing interest, to feel the difference between a person who sees you and a person who sees what you might be useful for. This skill, developed over years of immigrant navigating, is the skill that eventually saved my life. I want to be honest about that. I almost did not use it in time. Vincent was 38 when I met him. I was 31. He was handsome in the specific way of men who have always known they were handsome. Not arrogantly, exactly, but with the ease of someone who has never had to work particularly hard in rooms where appearance is currency. He was charming. He was attentive. He had a facility with compliments that felt at the time like genuine perception, like he was saying true things about me that no one else had bothered to notice, and which I now understand was a learned technique rather than an authentic response. Not all charm is malicious. Some charm is just the social lubrication of a personable human being. Vincent's charm was something more deliberate than that. It had a function. I was just not yet clear on what the function was. He worked in property development. Or he said he worked in property development. This is one of the areas I have had to excavate carefully in the years since, because what Vincent actually did versus what Vincent said he did were maps of the same territory with significant features missing from the version he shared with me. He managed investments, he facilitated deals, he moved money in the direction of opportunities and took a percentage for the service. Some of this was legitimate, some of it occupied the specific gray zone between legal and not legal, where a certain kind of businessman makes a very comfortable life because the gray zone has fewer regulations and more flexibility, and the people inside it are very practiced at explaining why what they do is actually fine. We dated for 18 months. He was in that period exactly the person you would want to date. Present, engaged, interested in my family, in the catering business, in my mother's accounts, and my father's philosophy of food. In retrospect, and retrospect is a powerful and painful lens, I can see the interest in the business as something other than it appeared, but I could not see it then. I was 31 and I was in love in the particular way that 31-year-old women who have been raised to be competent and independent can fall in love. With some relief, with the pleasure of finding someone who seemed to match the seriousness with which I took my own life. We married in a ceremony that my father catered with such love and excess that guests were still talking about the food a year later. It was a beautiful wedding. I have the photographs. I look at them occasionally and I feel the layered complexity of looking at a real, genuine, beautiful day that was also the beginning of something I needed to eventually escape from. Both things are true in those photographs. The happiness was real. The risk I was walking into was also real. Neither one cancels the other. The first years were not bad years. This is the thing I always want to say clearly, because I know how the ending ends, and I know the ending can make people rewrite the whole history as warning signs and red flags and obvious mistakes. It was not like that. There were good years, real warmth and real partnership and real moments of being known by another person in the way that makes a life feel shared rather than merely lived alongside someone. Vincent was present for those years. He was, in many ways, a good husband in the conventional measurements of it. But there was money trouble. There had always been money trouble beneath the surface. The property deals that were more complicated than he let on. The investors who called at odd hours. The legal correspondence that he handled before I could see it and explained away with the patient fluency of someone who has explained things away many times and knows exactly which explanations land. By year 7, the trouble was less beneath the surface. By year 9, it was visible. Debts that I had not known existed, partners who were owed things, a financial situation that, when I finally had the full picture presented to me by an accountant I hired independently because something in me had shifted into the vigilant mode that I should perhaps have engaged earlier, the picture was significantly worse than anything I had been told. I confronted him. It was a hard conversation and a longer marriage than I want to spend the rest of this telling you about. What matters? What matters for the story is what happened 18 months after that confrontation. What matters is the surgery. The surgery was for a benign tumor. I want to say that clearly because the word tumor carries a weight that can distort what I am telling you. It was not cancer. It was not life-threatening in itself. It was a growth on my left ovary that my gynecologist had been monitoring for 2 years and that had reached a size where removal was recommended. Routine, she said. Low risk. You will be uncomfortable for 2 weeks and then you will feel better than you have in a year because we will have resolved something that has been creating low-level discomfort in your body for a long time. I was not afraid of the surgery. I am not a person who frightens easily about medical procedures. My mother had 4 surgeries over the years and approached each one with the brisk practicality of a woman who has too much to do to spend much time being afraid. I scheduled it, I arranged the time off, I told my parents who offered to come and were told they didn't need to. It was routine. I would be home in 2 days. Vincent would be there. Vincent drove me to the hospital. He was attentive. He held my hand in the pre-op room. He spoke to the nurses with the easy social confidence he had always had. He kissed my forehead before they wheeled me in and said he would be waiting. The surgery was supposed to take approximately 90 minutes. I was under general anesthesia. I should have been completely, continuously unconscious for the duration of it. I was not. Anesthesia awareness, the medical term for regaining consciousness during a surgical procedure, is rare but documented. It happens in approximately 1 or 2 in every 1,000 surgeries. The patient becomes conscious but is typically unable to move due to the paralytic medications administered alongside the anesthesia. They can hear. They can, in some cases, feel. They cannot communicate. They lie in a state of complete physical helplessness while their mind is fully, horribly present. I became aware somewhere in the middle of the procedure. Not suddenly. There was no sharp return to consciousness, no dramatic awakening. It was more like surfacing slowly through water, the sounds of the room arriving before anything else did, the beeping of monitors, the clipped, precise exchanges of the surgical team, and then, closer, quieter, with the specific register of someone who is not part of the surgical team and is not supposed to be inside the room at all, a voice I recognized. Vincent's voice. I do not know how he got into that room. I have asked this question many times since, of the hospital, of the surgical team, of people with more knowledge of operating theater protocols than I have. The most honest answer I have received is that it should not have been possible, that the security and access controls around an operating theater are significant and specific, that what I heard should not have been able to happen, and yet, he was speaking to someone. The voice that responded was lower, less distinct. I could not identify it, could not tell you with certainty whether it was a physician or another hospital employee or someone else entirely. What I could hear clearly was Vincent, and what Vincent said, in the tone of a man having a practical discussion about a practical matter, with no more emotional charge than a conversation about a business arrangement, was this: "She has a policy, 2.3 million, double indemnity for accident or medical event. We are not in a good position right now, and I need this resolved. You understand what I'm asking. Just let it happen. She's worth more dead than alive. If something goes wrong in there, if the anesthesia has a complication, I need you to make sure no one works too hard to fix it." I heard this. I could not move. I could not speak. I could not open my eyes or squeeze a hand or do any of the things that the body does when the mind is screaming at it to communicate. I lay on that table in the dark behind my own eyelids, and I heard those words, and I felt not panic, which surprised me then and surprises me still when I remember it. I felt a terrible crystalline calm, the kind that arrives when something is so large and so clear that the normal responses cannot find purchase. I thought, you are alive. You are still alive. You are going to stay alive, and you are going to be very, very careful about what comes next. The surgery concluded. I survived it in the most complete sense of that word, not merely biologically, but with the full knowledge of what I had survived. I was moved to recovery. I opened my eyes when the nurses asked me to. I answered their questions. I squeezed the hand they offered. Vincent was there when they brought me to my room. He was sitting in the chair by the window. He stood when I came in. He came to the bedside. He took my hand. He said, "You're okay. I'm so relieved. I was so worried." I looked at him. I said, "Thank you for being here." And I began to plan. I want to tell you about the decision I made in that hospital bed because I think it is the most important decision in this story, and I think it deserves its own space. I could have told someone immediately, a nurse, the surgeon, the hospital administrator. I could have said, I was conscious during my surgery, and I heard my husband say these things. I could have done that in the first hour of my recovery, while the words were freshest, while whatever had happened in that operating room was most recent. I did not do it, and I want to explain why. Because I know how it sounds. I know that the reasonable, safe, conventional wisdom says, tell someone immediately, get to safety, do not stay quiet when you are in danger. I know that. I am not advising anyone else to do what I did. I am only telling you what I did and why. I did not tell anyone immediately because I was not safe. Not yet. Vincent was in that room with me. Vincent controlled the car that would take me home. Vincent controlled the house I would be recovering in. Vincent knew the surgeon, knew the hospital, had access to things and people that I did not yet fully understand. If I spoke immediately, if I said what I had heard before I had secured myself and had witnesses and had documentation and had a plan, I was a woman just out of surgery, on pain medication, making an accusation about words heard while under anesthesia in a state that any competent defense attorney would immediately describe as unreliable. And the man I was accusing was standing right there with his hand on my arm and his face full of performed relief in a position to manage whatever narrative came next. My mother always said, if you are going to do something, do it completely. Do not do it halfway and give the other side time to recover. Do it completely, all at once, with everything in place. She was talking about catering events when she said it, the logistical principle of making sure everything is ready before the doors open, because a partially prepared event is worse than no event at all. I applied it to this. I needed time. I needed to get home. I needed to be physically recovered enough to be mobile and functional. I needed to make contact with people I could trust without Vincent knowing I had made contact. I needed to understand the insurance policy, the $2.3 million he had referenced, what it required, what it precluded, what the claims process looked like. I needed to talk to an attorney. I needed to talk to the police. I needed to do all of these things in the correct order from a position of safety before Vincent had any indication that the woman in the hospital bed was not the woman he thought she was. I had 2 days in the hospital. Vincent visited both days, attentive, present. The performance of a worried husband continued without apparent interruption. I was warm and tired and grateful in the way of a recovering woman, and I watched him from behind my carefully neutral expression with the specific attention of someone who is memorizing a target. On the second day, while Vincent was getting coffee from the hospital cafeteria, I borrowed a nurse's personal cell phone. I told her mine was dead, which was partially true, and I called my cousin Stefano. Stefano is 11 years older than me, lives 40 minutes away, is a man of very few words and very firm loyalties, and was the person I trusted most completely to receive an extraordinary piece of information and respond to it practically rather than emotionally. I told him what I had heard. I told him what I needed. I told him he had approximately 12 minutes before Vincent came back. Stefano said in Italian something that I will not translate exactly, but that conveyed both his feelings about Vincent and his complete intention to help me. He said he would make calls. He said he would have things in place before I left the hospital. He said, "You just get home safely. I will handle the rest." I gave the nurse her phone back. I thanked her. I settled back against my pillows. Vincent came back with coffee. He sat in the chair. He told me about something he had seen on the news in the cafeteria. I listened. I nodded. I said the right things. He had no idea that the conversation I had just had already set in motion the events that would end everything he had planned. He drove me home 2 days later. He carried my bag inside. He helped me to the bedroom. He arranged my pillows. He asked if I needed anything. I said, "Just rest." He said he would be downstairs if I needed him. I waited. The waiting was the hardest part, not because I was afraid. Fear had been replaced by something colder and more functional, not because I was in pain, though I was. The surgery's physical aftermath was real, and recovery was uncomfortable, and there were moments in those days at home when the effort of maintaining normalcy cost more than I had easily available. The waiting was hard because I am not a patient person by nature. I am my mother's daughter. I want things done properly, done completely, and done now. Sitting in a bed and being patient while Stefano made calls and an attorney gathered information and a plan assembled itself with the necessary slowness of things done correctly, that required a sustained self-discipline that I'm still a little proud of when I look back on it. Vincent was home for the first 3 days of my recovery. He brought soup from a restaurant, not made himself, which is not a criticism, but is simply accurate. He brought magazines. He asked how I was feeling several times a day with the consistency of performance maintenance. I watched him from behind my recovering wife expression, and I thought, you have no idea, not a single idea. You think you are waiting for an insurance claim. I am waiting for something else entirely. My attorney, a woman named Grace Park, whom Stefano found through a contact and I spoke to by phone from the bathroom on day 2, door locked, water running, voice quiet, Grace had been thorough in the ways that matter. She had connected with a detective. She had explained the specific legal landscape of what I had described, the solicitation element, the insurance fraud dimension, the operating room access question. She said, we need documentation of the policy. We need to establish what access he had to the hospital and how. We need your testimony formally recorded, and we need to catch him in the act of filing or attempting to file, which means we need to wait until he believes the opportunity still exists. The opportunity he believed still existed was the life insurance policy. The policy, I had my own attorney access the documents through channels I will not specify, was real. $2.3 million. My life, my name, his beneficiary designation, which he had apparently managed to update 8 months prior to the surgery, during a period when I had been traveling for work and he handled some household paperwork that I had signed without reading carefully enough, which is a lesson I have given myself more than once and share with you now without judgment, because it's easy to say read everything and considerably harder to practice it in the daily trusting life of a marriage. Double indemnity for medical event. Vincent had been specific about that in the operating room. He knew the policy. He knew what it paid. He had done his research. Grace said we needed to wait for the insurance agent. She did not mean wait for me to die. She meant wait for Vincent to initiate a claim, to make the call, to set the fraud in motion in a documented, provable way. And to do that, he needed to believe I was still alive, but perhaps not for much longer, deteriorating, complications, a body that had been compromised by something in the surgical procedure. This is where I made the decision that required the most from me. I made myself appear sicker than I was. not dramatically. I am not an actress, and excess would have been visible, but I complained of symptoms I did not have. I slept more than I needed to. I let him see me pale and uncomfortable and uncertain in a way that I was not actually experiencing. I created the picture of a woman whose recovery was not going as well as hoped. I watched him on the phone when he thought I was asleep. On day 6, he made a call I was not supposed to hear. I heard it because I had been careful about where I positioned myself and because the house has acoustics that Vincent had apparently not fully mapped. He was in his study. I was in the hallway. He spoke in the low, specific voice of a man discussing something that requires discretion. He said the situation was developing. He expected the opportunity to solidify within the next week or two. He said he needed to know the process for initiating the claim and what documentation would be required. He was speaking, I would later learn, to a person connected to the original hospital conversation, someone who had been part of the arrangement, someone who became, in due course, an extremely important witness. Grace was notified. The detective was notified. Everything accelerated. And then the insurance company called to schedule a home visit. The call was arranged not by Vincent as he believed, but by Grace working with a detective and a contact at the insurance company who understood the situation and agreed to participate in what I will call a structured opportunity. A claims agent would come to the house. This was framed to Vincent as a routine wellness check. Some policies require confirmation of the insurance current health status, particularly following a recent medical event, before certain provisions are activated. Vincent believed this. He received the call. He scheduled the appointment. He told me the evening before the agent was due to arrive that someone from the insurance company was coming tomorrow. He said it casually. He said it was standard procedure. I said I was tired and was going to sleep early. He said good night. He kissed my forehead. He went downstairs. I lay in the dark and I thought about my father feeding people. I thought about my mother doing the accounts. I thought about the wedding, the beautiful wedding with all that food, and my father's face when he watched me walk toward Vincent and how much of hope he was for me, and how much I loved him for that hope, even now, even knowing what I knew. I thought about the operating table. I thought about the dark behind my eyelids and the voice I had heard and the decision I had made in that darkness to survive it, not just biologically, but completely, to come out of it with everything intact, my life, my name, my truth. The agent arrived at 2 in the afternoon. His name was Robert Sands. He was not who Vincent thought he was. His identification was legitimate, but his role in this visit had been coordinated with Grace and the detective, who were parked 2 streets away and connected to Robert by a communication device I will not describe in detail. Vincent answered the door. He was composed. He was the charming, easy, practically confident man I had married. He offered coffee. He gestured toward the sitting room. He explained in that patient, practiced voice that his wife was recovering from surgery, that she was upstairs, that she was not well enough to come down, but that he was happy to speak on her behalf and provide whatever documentation was needed. Robert Sands sat down. He opened his briefcase. He said, "Of course, and I'm sorry to hear she's not doing well. Before we get to the paperwork, I just need to confirm Mrs. Callow is still alive at this time." Vincent said yes. Reluctantly, I think, but yes. Robert said, "Could you just take me through the current situation, for the record?" And Vincent, who had been so careful, so patient, so practiced for so long, Vincent began to speak. He described my condition in terms that suggested deterioration he had not witnessed because I had not experienced it. He described symptoms that did not exist. He described a picture of a woman whose recovery was failing in ways that a medical chart would directly contradict. He described it in the confident, specific detail of a man who has been planning what he will say, and now he's saying it. Robert Sands was writing things down, and then Robert Sands looked up and said, "Would you mind if I spoke to her directly?" Standard verification. Vincent said, "She's not really up to." Robert Sands said, "It won't take long. It's required." There was a pause, and then Vincent said he would go up and ask. He came upstairs. He came into the bedroom. He looked at me, lying in the bed in the position I had been in for 6 days, the recovering wife position, the pale and uncertain position. He sat on the edge of the bed. He said very quietly, "There's an insurance man downstairs. He needs to see you. Just stay in bed. Just let him look at you. You don't have to say much." He arranged my face the way you arrange a thing, and I let him because the moment was not yet. He straightened the blanket. He said, "You're not feeling well, remember?" I said, "I'll remember." He went back downstairs. He told Robert Sands that his wife would see him. Robert Sands came up. He stood in the doorway. He said, "Mrs. Callow, thank you for seeing me. I'm sorry to disturb your recovery." I sat up in bed. Not slowly, not weakly. I sat up straight with my shoulders back and my voice clear and the full, considerable energy of a woman who has been waiting for this specific moment 11 days. I said, "I'm not dead yet, but his marriage is." And then I said, "Come in, Robert. There are some people I'd like you to meet." The door at the end of the hallway opened. Detective Sandra Ieri, who had been in the guest bedroom for 40 minutes, came out. Her partner came behind her. From downstairs, because they had come in through the back, coordinated with Robert's arrival at the front, Grace Park came up the stairs. Vincent was standing in the hallway. He looked at Robert Sands. He looked at Grace. He looked at Detective Vieri. He looked at me sitting up in bed, looking back at him with the expression of a woman who had made a decision in the dark behind her eyelids and had spent 11 days honoring it. His face went the color of something that has had all the blood leave it at once. I said, "I heard you in the operating room. I heard every word." He said nothing. I said, "I have been waiting for you to show me who you were in front of witnesses. Thank you for doing that downstairs." Detective Vieri stepped forward. I lay back against my pillows and I listened to them say the things that needed to be said in the official language of things being formally and finally done. The investigation that followed was long. I want to be honest about that, because stories like this sometimes present legal consequences as swift and satisfying, and the reality is considerably more procedural and exhausting. There were interviews, there were hearings, there was the question of what had actually occurred in the operating room, who Vincent had spoken to, how he had accessed that space, what had been agreed to versus what was not agreed to, what the other voice belonged to. That investigation involved the hospital, the state medical board, and took considerably longer than I would have preferred. I will tell you what I can. The person Vincent had spoken to in the operating room was not the surgeon. This I want to say clearly, because she was not involved and she deserves that clarity. It was a hospital employee in a position that gave him access, someone Vincent had a prior financial relationship with, someone who was in debt to him in ways that the fraud investigation subsequently revealed. This person cooperated in the way that people cooperate when cooperation is their best remaining option. What was agreed to, what was actually done versus what was promised, these are questions that the legal process addressed and that I will let the official record speak to. Vincent was charged, multiple charges across multiple categories, insurance fraud, solicitation, and charges relating to the hospital access situation that I will let the legal terminology name rather than my own. He was convicted on the majority of them. He is in prison. He will be there for some time. The insurance policy, the $2.3 million he had been so specific about in that operating room, was, of course, never paid. The insurance company's participation in catching him was not altruistic, but it was effective, and I will not complain about the motivation of people who help you survive. The marriage ended. This is almost absurd to state given everything, but I state it because I believe in naming things fully and clearly. The marriage, legally, ended. I will not say it ended the day I heard him in the operating room. Something ended that day, but the legal marriage continued through the investigation and the trial and was dissolved formally after his conviction. I sat in a courthouse on a Tuesday morning and watched the dissolution of 11 years and felt not grief exactly, not relief exactly, but something in between those things. Something that I have come to understand is simply what it feels like when something real ends, regardless of the circumstances of its ending. My parents came. When I could finally tell them, when the investigation was sufficiently advanced that Grace said I could inform my family, my father came, and he sat in my kitchen and he did what he always does, which is cook. He made a meal that took 4 hours and required the use of every pot in my house and fed me and Stefano and Grace and two neighbors who happened to stop by and didn't fully understand what the occasion was, but understood the food was extraordinary. My mother sat across from me while he cooked, and she held my hands and she said in Italian, the specific Italian of my childhood, "You read him wrong, but you read the situation right. That is the important one." She is not a sentimental woman, my mother. She is an accurate one. I think that is better. I have thought about the operating table many times since. The specific quality of that consciousness, paralyzed, present, unable to communicate, reduced to nothing but hearing and thinking. There is something both terrible and clarifying about that state. You are stripped of everything except the most essential capacities, understanding and decision. You cannot perform, you cannot manage, you cannot use the social tools that we carry through ordinary life. You can only hear and know and choose. In that state, with nothing available to me except those two things, I chose to survive. Not just to survive the surgery was doing its work, the medical team was doing their work, my body was doing what bodies do. I chose to survive what I had heard, to not let it end me in the other way, the way that has nothing to do with anesthesia and everything to do with what you do with devastating knowledge once you have it. I chose to be careful and complete, rather than immediate and exposed. I chose my mother's principle. If you are going to do something, do it completely. I was right to choose that, but I want to say something important alongside that. I was also lucky. Lucky that the awareness happened when it did. Lucky that I had Stefano. Lucky that I had Grace. Lucky that the structure of things allowed for the kind of careful response I chose to make. Not everyone has those things. Not everyone can make that choice. And if you are in danger, real, immediate, physical danger, please do not hear this story as an argument for waiting. Hear it as a specific story about a specific situation. Your situation is yours. Your safety is the first thing. Please make it the first thing. What I carry from it all is this. The body knows things. The part of me that had been filing things in that drawer, the late calls, the managed paperwork, the gray zone business, the trips I didn't fully understand, that part of me knew something long before the operating table. I chose not to look at it directly. I chose the generous interpretation. I chose to trust the performance over the information my own instincts were quietly offering. I am not blaming myself for that. I did not deserve what happened. Nothing I chose or didn't choose made his actions acceptable or my culpability real. That is important, and I believe that fully. But I also believe, because I think truth requires both of these things simultaneously, I also believe that I have since learned to take my own instincts seriously in a way I was not doing before, to open the drawers I had been keeping closed, to read the documents, to ask the questions that feel like accusations because sometimes they are, and sometimes the accusation is correct, and knowing that is better than the alternative. I am alive. I am entirely, completely walking around cooking my father's recipes alive. I'm teaching again. I'm an art history lecturer. I have been for the last 8 years. And I walk into a room full of young people and talk about the way human beings have always tried to make permanent the things they most feared losing. And I think sometimes about the operating table and about the dark behind my eyelids and about the decision I made there. And I think that is what survival looks like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a decision made in the dark to be very careful and very smart and come out on the other side of the thing with everything that matters intact. I have my name, my mother's training, my father's table, Stefano, who I owe more than I can calculate, Grace, who I send a very good bottle of wine to every year on the anniversary of a Tuesday afternoon in a courthouse, my own instincts, which I now treat with the respect they were always owed. And I have the story, which I have decided to tell not for the satisfaction of the telling, though I will not pretend the telling has no satisfaction, but because somewhere right now there is a woman lying awake in a house that does not feel safe, listening to something that does not sound right, with a drawer full of things she has been choosing not to examine, and I want her to know that her instincts are instruments, that the things she has noticed are worth looking at, that she can be careful and complete and smart about it, that the people who love her are a phone call away, that she can survive it. I did. Thank you completely, genuinely, from the deepest part of what I have, for listening to every single word of this. If this story reached somewhere real in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what you have heard that you have been choosing not to examine. Tell me what decision you made in the dark. I will be reading. I always am.